Hey,
Uh-oh, we're being live streamed, it said here.
this meeting, this meeting is being live streamed. Okay, that must be the work of Brian.
Looks
Steve.
like Ron is about to join us. Kilo Kilo Golf from the El from the El
Gesund Heights.
from Rancho Santa Barbara. Or maybe he has joined us already. There he is.
I'm here, Doc. I've just been listening to you guys chatting and enjoying the conversation. How's things on your side of the highway?
Still safe and sane over here. No, I don't hear any raucous mobs, attacking the mobile home park.
Yeah, well, I could probably throw a stone and hit your house and Dorothy in between.
Right.
What's interesting is next door in the San Vicente Mobile Home Park, there are at least four, maybe five hams. Several are generals, one advanced, and I never hear them on the net anywhere, and never see them on Zoom. So maybe they're just working HF independently. But do you know anything about them guys?
Nope. I know. I knew that when I lived over on your side, I knew that there were one or two hams around, but I never met any of them.
Yeah. Well,
Ron,
one of these days I'll knock on the door or something.
Yeah.
Ron, before I moved up here to out here to Arizona, when we were having the Bozo net there in Ventura County, we had a lot of folks who had been, shall we say, dormant hams,
Yeah.
and they pulled the handheld out and came back on the air when the lockdown started, because that was one way they could get interaction. It was interesting. We also had a similar phenomenon here in the Phoenix area. Totally independent, and that's kept on going with dating nets here. So it's all good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I take a walk every day all the way through our mobile home park, and Doc knows where it's at. We're neighbors practically. So I passed the backside of one of these mobile homes, and he's got two long wires spread out across the top of the house. And I've got his call sign and everything, but I haven't been able to get a phone number for him as yet. But one of these days I'll connect.
If you've got old QSL card, put it in his mailbox.
Smart idea. I have to get in that park. Both their mobile home park and ours are gated. They're not security, but they're gated. So you got to get a code to get in. So I'm sure I can.
Oh, I'm sure you can. You can. What you can do is just like the local thieves do. Wait till someone goes through and walk through behind them.
Yep, exactly that. Well, I guess we're the early birds today, huh? There's not too many people online. Say, Doc,
Yep.
how's your tilt-up antenna working out?
How's my which antenna? My vertical?
Yeah, your big vertical tilt-up.
Well, I tilted it back up a few, maybe a week or 10 days ago, and it it works fine. I haven't been on the air in the last day or two. I go on and listen once in a while. I don't call very often, but I just listen when I get curious about what the band is like, what the bands are like, and I think it's a 9-band or 11-band vertical, so it works, and I can there are useful resonance segments. And in the case of most of the HF bands, it's the entire band is under 1.5 to 1 SWR, and I think in one of the bands, however, I only have I think it's 80 meters. Is it the segment that's resonant is not very large, but big enough. In fact, I think I can flatten it out well enough. Oh, I have an auto tuner, and I can flatten it out to get from to all the edges of the band, or both edges of the band. But if I want to use it without the auto tuner, I only have a smaller segment of the 80-meter band. Anyhow, but it's working fine.
Good.
And I pat it down after that lightning storm we had, and then put it back up again, as I say, a week or 10 days ago. It goes up and down pretty easily, just a few cranks with that. I have a boat trailer crank winch on it.
Right.
It goes up in a matter of
I didn't find my
20 seconds.
Yeah. Are you clicking from the email or where are you clicking from?
I do need to become more active on HF. I've had so many medical appointments recently that I haven't been able to get to to any other project, basically. But now the only excuse is I'm too lazy, and I haven't gotten back. I've got to trace out all the wiring for both the DC and AC sources of power for the radio.
Powering on.
Well, you don't need any excuses, Doc. At our age, we can just enjoy it.
Yeah, I know. It's getting so I can't walk very far, can't stand very long.
Join the club.
But I discovered accidentally that I have quite a lot of bone curvature in my lower spine. They were taking a film of my belly for another purpose, and when I looked over at it, I realized that I have scoliosis in my lower spine. So I went in and saw a back surgeon about that. I don't expect to get surgery for it, but a back specialist, the orthopedic surgeon. And she tells me and then she took actual spine x-rays and tells me that my lower back is pretty much bone on bone with hardly any disc or cartilage left. And so that's basically why I can't walk very far. So I think the next thing we're going to do is get an MRI, and she'll take another look at it before decide. And she'll schedule me for some physical therapy, and maybe I'll give it a try, but I don't hold out much hope for any improvement. So.
Yeah, I understand that one. Well, you were looking okay last Saturday down at the club station. You seem to be holding forth pretty well.
Yeah, I can walk. I can get up. Sit in the
God
chair.
damn it.
No
Why do
problem.
they make this goddamn print so fucking small?
Holy mackerel. Who's that? Mike?
Yeah.
I have to say, I love it when that happens.
Hey, Mike, do you know you have an open mic?
Hello.
Hello, Mike.
You got an open mic there with that language.
Oh. Hello. Oh, shoot, what am I doing wrong? Okay, share witness. What
Okay,
is that?
Mike.
Damn it. They write this stuff in what
Yes,
they write.
Mike.
Damn it. They write on the screen what is basically bacteria. And you can't read it without a microscope.
That's Dave actually talking.
No. That's
Like
Mike.
isopropyl will take care of
Oh
most
no,
of the
I'm sorry.
bacteria.
No. What happened is his square moved over. Is that a boat you're on, Mike?
Usually.
Oh, yeah, Mike, I'm on a boat. I'm in Channel Islands Harbor, and it's a fantastic place to be. And I have no problems here. You know, a glass of wine every day. And what else?
And you've got excellent ground.
Hello there, Stuart. I see you. God darn it, I see you. You've got a background on the Channel Islands Harbor, and I know
Yes,
you're
I
not
do.
there. I know you're not there because you're in Arizona.
Yes. That background was one of the drawings by Dave Heibner.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great, fantastic. Well, how do you like your? Well, you've been there a while now.
I've been here in Arizona now. It's about 3-4 months.
Yeah. How do you like it?
Well, having grown up in Los Angeles, I can step. They say that they occasionally have some ozone problems here, but I step outside and I can see mountains, which is more than I saw when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And and it is pleasant enough. Now we're past our heat season. I can walk around outside in the evening and it gets down to maybe 70, 75 degrees.
Yeah. Sounds
During
good.
during the daytime, it is maybe 85 to 88. That's here in November in Arizona. Of course, in July, August, September, shortly after I moved here, I was real glad for the air conditioning because the thermostat was set for 75 degrees indoors.
Too low.
And it was 105 to 115 outdoors.
Okay. Well, hey, were you in town for the Ride for the Red?
Yes, I did come down to California for Ride for the Red. Was at Net Control with Steve King and a couple others there, so we had a chance to chat and get caught up. So
Great.
yes, I was there.
Super. Glad for you. I was unable to make it back. I had another commitment that weekend, and I couldn't do both. So
Yeah.
I went for the other. Yeah.
It was the Ride for the Red was a good event. It'd been about 2 years since we'd had one before because of COVID.
Yeah.
I've got a few they had some things we did not do this year that we had done in previous years. We did not use any APRS and didn't have GPS trackers in the sag wagons. So I'll have that in my write-up. That might be something they might want to put back in place for next year. Makes management of the ride a lot easier.
Hey, great. Hey, fantastic. Then good talking to you again. Fantastic. And hey,
I
need to
did
step
find,
in. We
I did
need-
find during field day, I put up a dipole at about maybe 20 feet here and was able to make contact with the V-Cars folks and the CVAR folks for field day.
Wow.
And so that's on 40 and 80 meters. So I will put up a more permanent antenna and then we can work out regular schedules. I might be able to check into the Tuesday night ARES net on a regular basis.
Okay, well, that'd be great. That'd be great. Hey, well, hey, good talking to you.
Yeah, I will
Fantastic.
fade back here into the
Oh,
quiet.
We need to step aside here because Brian wants to get in for the net.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Dorothy here.
Oh, there's Brian. There we are.
Yeah, I'm up here. Well,
You're over there for me.
I'm over here.
Yeah.
Can you see my fingers, Stuart?
Yes. I'm sitting between Doc and Rod. So
There's Dorothy. Better late than never. Where are you, Levi?
SFO Airport,
At the what airport?
San Francisco International.
Oh. Yeah, you might as well do a meeting there.
why would you
Yeah.
want to be in San Francisco? It's an expensive place to go to.
Hey,
Yeah, this
Levi,
burger was $10.
Levi, you gonna be back to the club station by tomorrow?
Yes.
Because I have that book for you to read.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna try to stop in. I should be there.
Yep, I'll see you in the morning.
Okay.
Are you at,
Okay, let's
you
get the
at-
meeting started here. I was waiting for Dorothy and she's here. Let's see, where are my? Let me get ready here and do the Pledge of Allegiance and we can get started. All right. Of course, as is our custom, we begin every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And this is as good a time as any. I'll start off here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I still got to get me a patent hat or suit.
well, the good news is, by the way, that civilian, military veterans now are permitted to salute the flag with a hand salute,
Proper hand salute.
and even if they're not wearing a hat, even if they're uncovered, as they say.
Oh, good. Do you have to be wearing a uniform?
Nope.
Oh, all right.
You can render a hand salute to the flag if it passes, or during the pledge, or during the Star Spangled Banner.
Thank you, Doc.
Okay. All right. As you know, this is election night and I hope all you voted online. I guess, did we get a lot of votes in, Dorothy?
Yes, we did.
Good. I didn't get any complaints, so I guess it worked. So
And there was nothing from the floor. Did you ask for votes from the floor? Nominations from the floor?
are there any final nominations from the floor?
I noticed something that there was no other people involved other than the regulars,
Regular what?
members, regular officers.
Well, Yeah, no one was nominated, I guess, to run for a position.
Or they
The,
didn't want to
nomin-
make any of the positions a contest.
Yeah, the nominating committee comes up with a slate of at least 7. So that's their job, to make sure that we can fill all the positions. And in this case, everybody that was here last year or for this current year was willing to do it again next year. So it was fairly easy for the nominating committee to come up with a slate of 7. But on the webpage, it explained if somebody is interested in running for a position, then somebody needs to nominate them. You need to have a second, and then they would get put on the ballot. Officially, we closed in order for us to make any changes to the ballot, we needed to know 2 days ago so that the ballot could be, we had to cut it off 2 days ago so that Dorothy could total all the votes and have them ready for tonight. But I guess we have no further nominations from the floor. So we will consider the nominations closed. And I guess Dorothy can read the results. I don't know if it's going to be a huge surprise.
Well, the last ballot was received at 12:20 p.m. on the 16th of November. We had 32 members vote. We had 2 non-members tried to vote, so their ballots didn't count. So I did receive 34 ballots altogether. Some people voted for only 4 positions because I think they misread the instructions that they could vote for 3 officers and 4 directors. But they only voted for 4 positions, which would be the first 3 officers and 1 director. So who knows? Anyway, the total count, there were only a couple of those that did that. But the majority of the votes, of the 32 votes that were cast, were for the slate that was presented.
Okay.
So I think that 32 ballots or votes of members would be considered a quorum.
Yeah.
About that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need about 16 or something, but
Yeah. It's 10% of the membership. So we had a quorum. So
we're all re-elected.
So you're stuck with us for another year.
Yep.
And hopefully next year will be a more exciting year than the last couple of years.
I printed out all of the ballots. If anyone would like to audit those, they're welcome to do that.
Look at, Levi's got his mask on. He's upside down.
Does anyone want to audit the ballots?
I don't hear anyone.
Okay. I will save them for a month.
Just in case anybody demands a recount.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'll save them for a month.
Okay, did you also save your tabulating tapes and all that?
Yeah, right,
Save them for
And the video
22 months.
As you are opening each of the envelopes, right?
Right. I don't know if any were received by mail. I did not get a report from the treasurer if any were received by mail.
it's so easy to do it online. It's once you're there, it's kind of hard to, I mean, it doesn't make sense to download the ballot and then mail it because you can do it right online. I'll try and make the instructions clear that they should vote for 3
So, yeah.
officers and 4 directors.
So there were no proxy votes either, so.
No. Okay.
Ballots.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you, Dorothy, very much.
You're welcome, Brian. You know,
Wow.
I didn't hear you announce anything like voting during the nets that you were in.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I didn't hear any on the cuckoo net in the morning.
Yeah, the first day I put it up, I announced it, and then I announced it in the technical mentoring and Elmering net, and then the nets that I do in the evenings. So, I've said it several times.
I heard it several times.
Okay, good.
Want to make sure everybody votes, but when it's the slate is everybody that ran before, they already know what to expect. And I think that kind of, there's no contest there. So a lot of people just sort of skip it. And we also sent out a couple of emails too, letting people know to go vote. So that's usually more effective than the nets because everybody gets an email. And the link was right in there to go directly to the ballot. So that I would have hoped that people would have clicked on that. Let's see. I don't see Daryl checking in here. Daryl had wanted to do an old timers, not an old timers, a homebrew night tonight. And so we kind of thought we'd add that to have that as part of the program tonight, and that people would bring a project, but I was going to let Daryl kind of MC that part of it because he really enjoys that, but he hasn't checked in. So let me see, did anybody bring a project or have a project to show?
I have one.
Okay, I got W0JFB. Anybody else?
I've got one I can talk about, but can't show you.
Okay, you could talk about it. Anyone else? All right, well, Mike, you go ahead and show us your project here.
It's my photo right behind me.
Well, that's not homebrew. Homebrew is something you made yourself at home.
Okay, well then I'll skip myself and you move on.
Well, go ahead and tell us about what's behind you.
This is about soldering, correct?
Well, we're going to have a little presentation about that. Yeah.
Well, I was involved with ATK Space Aerospace Systems for developing a program for solar arrays in space. And this program that's behind me is called the Orion Project, which is going to Mars. This was prototype 3, which was completed, and I was a NASA wire harness soldering operator for this project. This project got debunked after we proved program. 17 of us engineers were laid off in 2014. And then they returned that program, and now, because we proved concept, and they developed this program to be developed, and now it's going to be put on a bus to go to Mars, and it's actually being utilized for a lot of other buses in space for other programs. So I'm very proud of this. I'm very happy that I got the education and knowledge of from NASA to solder. This is one of my highlights for my grandkids, my grandson, and my all four of my kids. But the most productive thing I've ever done in my life, to say the least. There are a lot of soldering points that I want to bring up if anybody has any questions tonight. when we get to that point, I'll be happy to talk about it. But that was one of the things I did. I solder, now that I'm retired, I actually solder a lot. I actually solder solar connectors and a lot of other things that I need to put into things that I do at home. So it's just one of those things I do, but I don't have anything to show for it other than the solar systems that I've built.
When you said put on a bus, I hope you don't mean you're putting it like on a bus to Mars.
A bus is what NASA calls a transport container that goes
Okay.
into space, and then it's deployed from that.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Well, let's see. Stuart, you want to talk about yours?
Okay, mine isn't so much a home brew, but more an expedient brew. In my area of Arizona, every square bit of ground is owned by one developer or another. And therefore, you've got CCNRs and HOAs. One of the first things I did was got formal permission. I don't know why I needed permission for this, but formal permission to put up a flagpole so I could have a flag on it. The flagpole and put it up is also a 10 to 80 vertical. And the other is a string of artificial trees. One of them is a discone tree. A couple others are octopus dipole trees. And they are suitably decorated to be at least as convincing an artificial plant as anything you'll see on the freeways put up by Caltrans or Edison. And they seem to have bought it though so far. So I'll let you know if they tell me to take it down or fine me or spank me.
You should have taken pictures. That'd have been.
I have not been that public about it yet, but I will take pictures and send them off to you.
Okay. That's a very inventive use of or inventive way to hide your stuff. I know that there's if you drive around Montecito, all the people in Montecito complain that they don't have any cell coverage, but then they don't ever want to see a cell site. So
Yeah.
if they want to put in a cell site, they all go to the Montecito Association and complain. They just want it on somebody else's property, not their property, where they can see. But they sure want their phones to work. So yeah, they have all kinds of interesting ones. They've got fake palm trees. I've seen actually up in around Coarse Gold and Oakhurst up there. There's several cell towers that look like really poor Kmart Christmas trees, you know?
Yeah.
And but there's what else did they've got if you keep your eyes open and if you look at the vaults they have on the ground, usually if you look up when you see the vaults next to something like not next to a telephone pole or something, and you can usually, if you're careful, you can see some kind of inventive way they've disguised the tower. I know that the downtown Santa Barbara, they had every time they wanted to put up a cell phone tower, they had to go in front of a design board. And this was probably 15 years ago. And they literally had to manufacture new types of equipment in order to put cellular stuff. They made one array. I think it's still there. It's in a building somewhere about mid downtown State Street, or probably up closer to like maybe like Pedregosa or something. I don't remember the exact street, but it's got a cupola on it with arches in it, like a bell tower type thing. And they made an array as a trim around the bell tower on all four sides. And that they coupled that with some kind of RF transparent covering, so that these would function as an array of cell phone antennas. Now I think that they're just sticking them up on telephone poles now and on street lights and wherever they can get away with it. But that a lot of the hooplas died down. But everybody wants their cell phone to work and complain when it doesn't, but they sure make it difficult to get the antennas up. So maybe you could get a part-time job, Stuart, consulting for the cellular companies.
Used to work for Verizon, but now I'm not working for them. Right now, I'm getting my Social Security, I'm getting my disability checks, and the house I'm in is 2/3 paid for, and I'm able to sit back and put my feet up and drink my iced tea.
There you go.
Comment real quick.
Go ahead, Michael.
I put up a J pole from Levi that Levi made a J pole for me, and I put it up in my backyard. But before I put it up, I am in a Meridian apartment complex. So what I did is I took a bamboo stock that's been growing in my backyard that was 40 feet tall. I cut 10 feet off the top. I hollowed out the bottom, turned it upside down, turned the part that I hollowed out upside down, put it in the ground, and put that bamboo in the ground and mounted it on itself, and then posted it on the corner of my complex and painted it camouflage so it matches the pine tree behind me. And I put the J pole on top of it, and it works perfect. They can't even see it.
In my case, I got permission for putting up artificial trees, and there's very few trees in the area because primary gardens are crushed rock. So I've artificial trees, and so I've gotten some like some of the artificial trees you see in some office buildings, and I've tie-wrapped those branches from those into the onto the octopus dipoles, and they have what looks like an artificial tree. So you give them what they think they're looking at.
Now, are they in the ground, Stuart, or?
I had one of the dipoles up about 25 feet before on some masting, but we get some seasonal winds that were being a little bit challenging to my mill surplus masting. So it took that down. I'm going to be putting up something a little bit more permanent with a little bit better camouflage on it. Basically, I have to spend some money for a crank up mast. So I can crank it up with the camouflage on it, crank it back down as needed.
So your trees can grow or shrink?
Yes.
Has anyone noticed?
Couple of my neighbors there aren't too many retired Navy in this area. I am right next to Luke Air Force Base, but there's a fair number of retired Air Force, and they've got no complaints about antennas so long as it doesn't bother them. And they conveniently look the other way. They'll say, "Oh, what a nice artificial tree you've got."
Yeah, it's about 10 feet taller tonight than it was last night. Well, whatever works.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the story of people playing a prank. It was in a movie too, Amelie, a movie called Amelie about a French woman. People were annoyed with the person with some guy. So they snuck into his apartment every day when he was gone, or every few days while he was at work, and he had a goldfish, and they would put a slightly larger goldfish in and take the smaller one away. And pretty soon the fish was too big for the bowl, and the guy went out and got a new bowl, and so forth and so on. And then after a couple of months of that, the fish was huge. They just started the reverse process, and they'd sneak in and put a slightly smaller fish in every day until it got back down. Little tiny fish in a great big bowl. You know, in Arizona, I lived there for about 7 years, before I just came back here. About 30 years ago in Arizona, someone told me the exact year, but I can't remember. The cities realized that they were spending an awful lot of time using city facilities, like maybe the police, solving a little arguments between neighbors about things like that. So they made a requirement that anybody that came in with a development plan for a new part of town had to provide, that plan had to include a plan for an HOA, so that they would wind up dealing with all these little picayune but very emotional issues. So that's why after a certain point in time, every place you look has HOA and with all the
Well,
rules.
part of it, Doc, is also that and I saw this in Oxnard as well, but the HOAs and the CCNRs that they embed in there let the HOA board essentially have control over their acreage. And for the developer, it means that you're not going to have some clown coming in and painting their house magenta and phosphorescent orange or things like that.
Sure.
But which would affect the property values of other people. But also, in my case in Oxnard, the developer was using cable TV wire for the for the remotes for the gate access, things that should have been 50 ohm. He was using 75 ohm because he had a bunch of it. It was cheap. There was a lot of things where they were cutting corners and they really didn't care. They had written in the original CCNRs that any interference was the responsibility of you couldn't have any two-way radios of any sort, because in theory, because it was going to interfere with gate openers, things like that. And then they weren't using the right cabling for the gate systems. And they were using real shoddy wiring. So it was just an excuse for them to cut corners and not use proper wiring when putting the systems in too.
When I moved down there, it was about 10 years ago, or maybe 12. I went to a real estate agent and said that I needed to buy a house, but I said, don't show me anything that's got an HOA or any CCNRs on it. So basically, I moved into Mesa, and the house was just old enough. It was probably 25, 30 years old. And it was old enough that it had been there just before these new HOAs started doing all this stuff. So I wound up in a house in a neighborhood in Mesa, and the only rules regarding ham radio antenna, you didn't even have to go to the city to ask permission unless the antenna was going to be more than 75 feet high. And so basically I went in and without any trouble at all, put up a 55-foot tubular tower with a DB11 stepper antenna on the top, 3-element antenna. It was a wonderful setup, except it turns out that stepper antennas are impossible to repair if anything goes wrong with them, because you can never figure out which of the 350 connections is the wrong resistance. So anyhow, they're terrible to try to troubleshoot or fix, even with help from the factory. So aside from that, it was a great plan, but avoiding them was still possible then. May not be anymore, because I think all the newer neighborhoods are now under CCRs for just exactly the reason that Stuart described.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything to share? Any other homebrew project? Okay, then I guess we'll start the presentation here. Now, what I did, there's a lot of hams out there are pretty go around to meetings and do presentations, and luckily they're all generous enough to post their PowerPoint presentations and for other clubs to use. And I found this one from a guy named Gary Sutcliffe, W9XT. And it's all about soldering, and it's kind of, it's got a slant for, I'm sure there's going to be, most everybody here is going to know a lot of this stuff already. I was hoping to get some of the newer hams here that don't do much soldering. I see a lot of people coming to the club station that, sometimes dropping off cables to have somebody solder a connector on them for them or something, or they're soldering with totally wrong equipment, and wondering why their projects aren't working right. They're using something that's too hot, or something that's not hot enough, or the wrong soldering iron for electronics at any rate. But anyway, so we'll let me start this here. Let's see. Okay, and then let me share my screen first. Okay. So, all right, can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
All right, let's see what Gary has to say for us here. Let's see, the techniques presented here are not the only way. There are other good methods. There are a lot of bad methods too. This is based on his experience and 48 years of experience in the electronics industry. Some tips are for small increases in reliability, and they're easy to do. So why not make them as reliable as possible? Let's see. All right. What is solder and soldering? Process to join pieces of metal with molten filler, plumbing, sheet metal, jewelry, stained glass windows. For electronics, it provides a solid mechanical and electrical connection. Solder is an alloy of 2 or more metals designed to have a low melting point temperature. Lead-based solder. What types of solder are there? Lead-based solder is traditional and most common solder used by hams. They're tin lead alloys, 60-40 most common. Melts at 370 degrees. There's 6337 also available, and it melts at 361 degrees Fahrenheit. Oops, why does it go? Okay. I have a part of the Zoom thing on my screen here, so it makes it hard to see. Lead-free solder is getting to be more popular here. When you go to buy solder at some places, that's what they want to sell you is lead-free solder. It's required in many countries because of the toxic nature of lead. Most consumer products are lead-free. Tin, silver, copper alloys, most common. Some add zinc or manganese. It melts at 420 degrees Fahrenheit to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, depending upon the alloy. And it's harder to use for hand soldering. Flux is used with solder to help remove any corrosion on the components and circuit board. Solder for electrical work have cores of flux in the solder, multi-core solder. Flux is also available in liquid form and in pens, and these little pens are really handy. If you've ever done any plumbing soldering, you use 60-40 solder or 50-50 solder usually, and you use a can of flux and you brush it all over. And these little Kester pens, and there's a couple of other ones, are real nice. They dry out fast. So if you get one of these, keep it upside down so that or with the tip down so the point doesn't dry out. And they're real good for cleaning pads or cleaning areas where you're going to solder. Let's see, types of flux. There's acid flux. That's what they use in plumbing and sheet metal, and you don't want to use that with electronics. There's rosin flux. That's the traditional flux, leaves a brown residue that is inert in most cases and can be removed with alcohol. Manufacturers moved away from rosin to be green in removing flux. In other words, not using alcohol, I guess. There's water wash, organic flux. It washes off with warm water, must be cleaned with warm water after soldering to prevent corrosion. And no clean, RMA, leaves a reduced amount of flux residue used in most commercial electronics soldering to reduce manufacturing costs. It's inert and okay for most applications, but should be cleaned for critical high impedance, high voltage, etc. It's best for soldering stranded wire because the flux will migrate under the insulation. Keep a selection of solder types and sizes. And he says, note here, don't break off a length of solder from a roll, cut it instead. Breaking it stretches the solder and disrupts the flux in its core. Now, I didn't know that. So sometimes I wiggle it and break it. I'm not doing that anymore. You can never have too many antennas, radios, or rolls of solder. And he wrote on there, what I write on my spools is the melting point, because some of them have different melting points so that I can set my soldering iron to the right temperature. Soldering irons and station features, replaceable tips. Tips wear out, different tips for different soldering jobs. Make sure tips are easily available before buying a new station. If you're going to invest money in a nice soldering rig, some of them come with tips, but you can't buy any aftermarket tips. There's some of the ones that are designed for more either hams or people that have that are professionals in electronics. Most of their tips are exchangeable with other brands, or a lot of them are, so that you can get a wide variety of tips. Grounded tip. 3-prong AC plug protects semiconductors from static. Proper wattage for the job, adjust temperature control, and it's best if it's regulated. Here's a couple soldering guns. These are probably everybody's seen these in somebody's junk drawer. Here's something a little better. Here's adjustable soldering stations. There's a Weller and I don't know what this one is, but these have, the problem with some of these is that you don't know what the temperature actually is when you dial it in. Some of the newer stations have digital readouts on them that'll tell you what the soldering temperature is. And it makes it very easy to set it exactly right for the type of solder you're using. And I guess these are the Heiko brand. This has a dial in, a dial that lets you set the temperatures right here. And here's just a Weller soldering station. These are regulated stations. The Heiko makes a really nice one that has a red digital readout that
No, I couldn't reach it. No.
Okay, solder tips. This is what I was referring to a little earlier. Solder tips transfer heat to the junction. Conical tips are the most common. That's this one on the right side. Contacting the side of the tip to the joint will help transfer the heat better. The chisel-shaped tip provides a large surface at the end to transfer the heat. Chisel tips are the best for PCB soldering and match the tip to the job. Larger tip for bigger joints, small for small parts. Note the plated area on the tips. Solder will adhere to the plated area. Keep your tip clean. Clean tip before making a solder joint, not after it. Clean new tips before use. Turn on iron and coat entire plated area with solder. Turn off the iron when done. And don't forget to let it run for a few days. Or don't forget and let it run for a few days. And coat tip with solder before turning it off. Now, I had a bad habit of cleaning my tip when I was all done, and I was told by some guys in the shack, no, don't do that. Put a glob of solder on there and then turn it off, and that'll keep your tip from getting corroded and not holding the solder. And then when I turn the solder on, then I clean it and use it then. Tip cleaners. Use quick swipes with a sponge cleaner, a wet sponge with distilled water. This is a brass tip cleaner. Over on this side, there's all kinds of these things. They're sort of like Brillo pads or something, and you just kind of flick your soldering iron through there, and it takes off all the excess solder. The sponge types, remember, if you hold it there too long, you'll reduce your temperature on your tip a little bit. So if you use the sponge type to clean it, you might want to wait a couple of 10 seconds or so before you do your joint, because it may have cooled it off. Soldering safety, eye protection. Flux or solder can splash into your eyes. Good ventilation. There's flux has fumes. Use a fan or a solder smoke absorber. Lead is toxic. Wash hands after soldering. Don't eat, drink while soldering. Keep iron temperature low. Lead starts to vaporize at 752 degrees Fahrenheit. So probably most of us don't solder that hot, but and I don't know anybody who's followed any of these except for guys that worked in places where they made them. Keys to good solder joints: clean metal, clean wires, component terminals, and circuit board. Clean component leads if necessary, paper towels and alcohol, the rubber pencil eraser that works really well, especially for pads on circuit boards. Scrape with a knife on heavy wires for antennas, etc. Clean circuit board with alcohol and a clean old toothbrush if pads show any corrosion, and use extra flux if you need it. Another key to a good soldering joint: right amount of heat. Heat the joint with the tip and then melt solder at the connection. Joint will be at the proper temperature for good solder flow. Flux will be available. Hold the side of conical tips on the joint for the best heat transfer. Add a small amount of solder to the tip if necessary to get good heat transfer. Heat thoroughly, but don't overheat. Solder should flow freely around the joint or circuit board pad. Don't let component leads or wires move while solder cools. Use a larger tip for bigger connections like thick wires, coax connectors, etc. That's that's about 50% of soldering skill, is knowing when to apply the solder, when you're depending upon what you're soldering, when you think it's hot enough so the solder flows and flows all around the component without having to leave it there and pump solder on it, trying to get it coated.
Comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you're soldering the tip of a wire that you stripped, the most important thing is you always want to leave a fraction of that wire visible. The tip of that wire should be soldered, but you should always leave that other part next to the insulation visible in the wire, because you don't want the solder to creep up into the insulation. That creates a breakage over time. That's the only thing I want to say right now.
Okay. Terminal soldering. Now, this is good practice. A lot of people are going to be putting wires in terminals and they'll just twist them and stick them in there. But it's one thing I always do is I tin my wire for terminals, because it just makes things neater. You don't have any little hairs flying off and causing a short somewhere, or causing some kind of other problem. Anyway, prep the leads, tin stranded wire with a little bit of solder. Use rosin or no clean flux solder. Flux will pick up under the insulation and can corrode if water wash is used. Whoops. Okay, it's best to leave the first 1/16 inch after the insulation solder free. If the wire is stressed, it will break at the point the solder ends. If that point is inside the insulation, the wire could break, but it'll appear to look okay. So that's what Mike was saying. Okay, terminal soldering. Thread a hooked wire or lead through the terminal. It's not necessary to make a tight wrap. Make it secure enough that it is stable while soldering. And press your tip up against the junction and let the heated joint melt the solder. The hole should be filled with solder. The joint should be round, smooth, and shiny. Now there's a kind of a little bit of a knack to, not a knack, but sort of a good practice when you're applying solder. Here you can see it's hard to tell whether he's applying it to the joint itself or to the soldering iron, because it looks like it's touching both. But in the same theories, the theory is the same in doing plumbing soldering. And if you're soldering copper pipe, for example, you heat the pipe. If you're soldering like say elbow to a length of pipe, you heat the elbow and you get the joint really, really hot. And actually you can take the heat away at that point, and then you can solder. You apply the solder to the junction of the elbow and the length of pipe, and it should stay hot for a little bit. You can solder the whole pipe. Then you have it hot enough, and the solder will suck down in the joint. And same theory is the same with doing electronics. Is you should heat the joint and make sure the joint can melt the solder before you apply the solder. If the joint can't melt it, then you're just melting solder onto a cold joint, and you'll get that's where you have problems.
A comment real quick.
Yeah.
The strain before, you had the solder wire. That's an ANSA J standard, which has got actual resin inside the wire. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So the guy wrote on it right here, rosin core. Okay. All right, good and bad solder joints. The blue wire, that's a good joint, smooth and shiny. Black wire is a bad joint. The hole's not filled. Orange wire is a bad joint, rough and dull joint. Wire moves while solder was cooling. This can happen if the iron is too small or the tip is not held on the joint long enough to get it hot enough. It's sometimes called a cold solder joint. Okay, through hole PCB, printed circuit board soldering. I don't know if you guys use these little benders. If you have one, they cost like $3 or something. They're real handy for doing these because you get nice clean bends, and it makes your board look more professional, more like you cared about it when you were putting it together. Anyway, it says use bend leads and use a bender if you have one. Use needle nose pliers if you don't have a bender. There's another tool that I use that is a wire bender. Well, after I'm done with this, I'll show you. It's like a pair of pliers, and it has different radiuses. And you can bend. It's real neat if you want to do a weird, if you have to curve something around something to make it work right, and you can do compound bends with it, and and they come out really uniform looking. Let's see. Okay, insert component leads through holes and push down till the component body rests on the circuit board. And you can tack solder one lead if you want to hold it in place. Another thing that I use all the time is I have a little dispenser of Kapton tape, and I just take a little, a 3/4 inch piece and just tape the piece down. Kapton is designed for high heat, and it just easily removes when you're done and holds everything in place. And it looks a lot nicer when you don't have, little tack marks all over the face of your board.
Comment?
Yeah.
Sorry, and he covered it and I missed it, but when I find when you're stuffing a through hole board, you start with the shortest components, because when you tip it over, they'll press against the board. Then flip it over back to the right side up, and then do the next tallest and the next tallest and the next tallest. So for this particular board, if you were to solder, it looks like probably the BNC connectors on the far right would go in there. If you did those first, you kind of screwed yourself using that nice technique. So anyways, there's that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, but you want to start with the smallest components, as like I think Dave was trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so do any surface mount that you got first, and well, then the resistors and diodes and stuff, and then capacitors, and then fittings and things like that. Okay, let's see. All right, next one. Okay, now we're on the back side here. Note where eye protection when you cut these leads go flying. Bend the leads out slightly to keep part in place. If you didn't tack solder on the top side, use a resistor lead as a height gauge to cut leads to the proper height. And
Hey,
then,
Brian,
yeah,
those wires, I think people need to know that those wires are a lot sturdier than you think. They're not made of any kind of special lead. They're actually steel, and they really will fly. I mean, that's why they tell you to wear eye protection, because you will get one eventually stuck in your shirt. You'll get one stuck in your arm. They fly.
Yeah. Okay, this guy does it different than how I do it, but let me explain how he does it. Some like to solder the joint, then cut the lead. This leaves the copper core of the wire exposed to the air where it can corrode. The shock of cutting the wire will cause a little degradation of the solder joint. I'm not sure I believe that. Anyway, put the tip on the joint. This is a conical tip, so the side touching the pad is the best for heat transfer. Let the connection melt the solder. Ensure that the pad is filled with solder, and cut the end of the lead that is covered with the solder. I always leave my leads full length until after I've soldered, and then I leave just a couple millimeters or a millimeter of wire exposed. And the reason is that sometimes I change what I want to do and I want to desolder it at some point in the future. Well, I have a gun that fits down over the lead, and I press the trigger and it sucks all the solder out of the joint perfectly. And it works a whole lot better when there's a little bit of a lead exposed. And so I've just done it that way. Also, too, if you're into doing things like Raspberry Pis and which I do a lot of boards like that, all of the header boards and everything all have the pins exposed. You could cut them off if you wanted to, but you definitely, it's a whole lot better just to leave them the way they are. That's the way they come if they're pre-soldered at the factory. And if you get them without being pre-soldered, so I don't know. It's a style thing, I think, and how you like to do it. Let's see. Okay, through hole. Okay, we're still on it. Use a larger tip for soldering larger connections. So he's got a fairly good sized pad there and some space around it. So he's using a chisel tip with maybe a little bit larger diameter solder. Okay, here's some examples of solder connections. A has too little solder, B has too much solder. C and D, pour pad fill on C and it's shorting the D, although sometimes you want to bridge D and C, and so that's kind of a way to do it. E, the joint is dull, good or bad. It's according to him, it'd be bad. Okay, surface mount parts. Now, these are the things that are tricky. If you may have soldered a lot of other things and stayed away from surface mount technology. Surface mount technology is used in most new designs for economic reasons. SMT parts cost less than leaded parts due to the less material to make a component. SMT parts can be placed by a machine. They have these machines they call pick and place machines, and they go lickety split, and the components are all stuck to rolls of tape with the component on it, and it picks them off the tape and places them on the board in exactly the right position. The small component size means a smaller circuit board with more parts for the same size board. Solder holds the surface mount parts to the surface of the circuit board. Many new electronic components are only available in SMT. Larger SMT parts can be soldered by hand. After practice, hand soldering SMT is faster than leaded devices. Now, here he has that board that we earlier saw, those two SMT resistors. Here's how to solder SMT capacitors or resistors. He cleans them first with flux. Then he tins one pad with solder. Sometimes if you buy a board that's like in a kit, sometimes the pads will already be tinned, so you don't need to tin them. You just have to kind of look and see if they've got a little bump on them. Okay, then hold the part in place with curved tweezers and reheat the tin pad. And that will heat the other side, or heat the side that's been tinned, and then you can just solder the remaining pads. You'll probably get some flux all around, so use some alcohol and a toothbrush and clean it up real good.
Comment.
Yeah.
The NASA standards for 10 steps. If you're interested in soldering, number 1, prepare the connection. Number 2, position the connection. Number 3, clean the connection. Number 4, cut and clean the solder. Number 5, clean the soldering iron. Number 6, position the soldering iron. Number 7, apply the solder. Number 8, tin the solder iron. Number 9, clean the connection. And number 10, examine the connection. So this is the 10 steps that we all had to follow in the NASA standards of soldering. So if you want to know that, if you want to know more of that, just let me know.
Okay. Here's here's a larger and integrated circuit. Coat the pads with the flux and tin one of the corner pins. That's just going to be used to position your chip. Then you position it with tweezers and just take your time. If you got real shaky hands, you know, just because it's kind of, it takes a little while to get the knack of getting these positioned right, because all you got to do is breathe hard and you can move them. So, you know, position them, get them right. And then you reheat the tin pad and it'll stick that's an awful looking job there. It'll stick that one corner pin and that'll hold it in position. Then you can go ahead and you can solder the opposite corner and then go ahead and solder the remaining joints. Soldering the opposite corner first will make sure it doesn't wiggle at all. And then heat the remaining joints. That's what it typically looks like when you're using rosin core solder. And then you want to clean it up. So, you know, there again, he says use it if you're using, use water. Yeah, I use regular 60-40 solder all the time. And I have a bottle of 99% alcohol. Don't use rubbing alcohol that you get, you know, shouldn't be 60% or 71%. Get the electronics grade, 99% alcohol.
IPA, yeah.
IPA. And then just go over with a toothbrush and it'll look like great, just like this. Now there's another way to do this.
Comment.
Yeah.
Alcohol is hygroscopic. Alcohol absorbs water out of the air and becomes more dilute. So I guess I'd recommend just looking up the definitions. I think that no matter if you had 99% alcohol and it was in a bottle for a while, it would become more dilute as time went by. So that's one thing you need to look out for if you're using alcohol that you want to be 100%. You have to handle it. You have to prevent the absorption of water out of the air.
Yeah, one thing I always do is if I'm using it, I put the cap back on immediately. Don't let it sit. I use a ton of it when I'm doing 3D printing because that's what I clean the bed with. And so I buy it by the gallon. So actually I buy 4 quarts, but I get a gallon's worth at a time. But it's and you can get little bottles, although a little bottle will cost you almost as much as a quart if you find it by the quart. Let's see here.
Well, isopropyl alcohol is your best friend when it comes to soldering.
Yeah, they're talking about the percentage though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay.
Good point, Dave.
Okay, these are good solder joints. Common SMT hand soldering problems. Short between IC pins. That's one thing you got to be real careful about. Lifted legs of IC above solder, no connection. That's another thing you got to look at, because if you got to be very careful with your components, because if you say you dropped one a little bit, and it doesn't have to be very high. It can be, 6 or 8 inches, and you dropped it on your desk or your workbench or something, and you bend one of those little pins up. It may not have a good connection. Chip resistors or caps, not level and one end is making a connection and the other isn't. That's kind of how it will work. Solder bridges between nearby pads. A lot of these, some of these, especially things for using like microcontrollers, some of them are very close together, and you got to be real careful and look at that. Make sure you don't have any little bridges or any kind of anything going in between them.
Hey, Brian, they call those spikes. Got to be really careful. Those are the most dangerous things you can do. Spikes, little solder that actually looks like a little point towards another direction that
Yeah.
can create contact to a negative. That actually it's called a spike. You don't want ever have any spikes in your soldering connection.
Okay, SMT soldering with solder paste, with solder paste reflow oven. Joints are smooth and shiny. Only a little solder at each connection. Inspect SMT assemblies with a magnifier. I think this is not quite clear here. Let me see what he's got on the next page. Okay. There's another way to do this, and there's we have one down at the club station, and I have one. It's a little well, there's a couple other ways to do this. The pick and place machines put these components on boards that have all been cleaned, and they have all the pads have been tinned. And they place the components on there, and then they go through an oven, and the oven heats up the whole board and melts the solder. And when it comes out the other side, all of your components are all soldered, and they should all be perfect because no human hand touched anything. You can accomplish something very close if you use a soldering, what they call a rework or reflow station. It's a little, it's a unit that is about the size of about half the size of a toaster. It's got a heater in it and a fan, and it blows hot air through a tube and through a hose. And you have a little gun, and you have different sizes of tips you can put on there. And what it does is it focuses heat in the area depending upon the tip size that you're using. So to do a little resistor here, you could just heat up the whole resistor, and all of a sudden it just melts. It's the neatest thing because it just melts and you're done. You can do the larger components. You can go down one side and just kind of go along like, from one side to the other with your little gun. And then all of a sudden, all the joints will just melt. You'd see them. They'll just liquefy, and the component leads will sink right into the solder. And then you do the other side, and you're done. It makes really clean-looking installations. And it is also good for removing components. Now, say I wanted to change a resistor, or I got one that, just burned out, and or I needed to make a modification. I put on the wrong chip. I put a voltage regulator where I should have put something else. And you just heat that up again, take your tweezers, and you can lift the piece right off the board, and it's all ready for a new piece. So all you got to do is clean it up a little bit and put the right one on and do it again. And you seldom do even have to add any more solder. Okay, now we're going to go into doing coax connectors. This is what I see a lot of people bring into the club station because there's a little bit of finesse with these. To do a coax connector, you cut the end of the coax square. Don't cut it with side cutters and mess it all up and crimp it and everything. There's actually special cutters that are curved for cutting coax that do a really good job and give you a nice square cut. The end of the coax should extend slightly past the end of the connector. So you lay it down next to your connector and let the end of the coax stick out a little bit. And then you can use the connector as a template, as a guide to see where you want to cut the insulation. So in this case, with this particular connection, you want to cut off the insulation between the holes and the knurled ridge. So right in here. Then you remove the braid and insulation. If the center conductor is multi-strand, make sure all the strands are twisted tight. Tin multi-strand stuff before you attempt to go any further to keep it twisted tight with no little whiskers coming out. Use minimal solder because you don't want the, if you do tin it, because you don't want it to increase the diameter and not able to get it through the tip on the connector. Okay, and then he goes back and he figures out, okay, where he cuts you want to make sure that when you put the connector on that it's going to go over the insulation. So he figures that he's going to leave a little bit of space in here for the insulation to go inside the connector. So he cuts it back about here. Now he tins the braid with the rosin core solder, and he keeps it real tight so that he can get it into the coax connector. And then trims it up with the side cutters here. Actually, I should have mentioned this. If you don't have any, these little flush cutters here are real inexpensive. These are like $3. You can get real nice ones that are more money, but these are good. You can just throw them away at $3 when they get nicked up. But it's they cut super flush to the not like regular side cutters that have a bevel on it. You're able to cut things right up to a board. And in this case, it makes it real good to clean up the end of the tips. So he gets off any little fuzzy stuff that's going to impede his progress here. So that's what it's going to look like before he puts the connector on this picture on the right. Now, this is something that everybody's probably done more than once. You got to put the outer shell of the connector on before you do any soldering. And I know people that have soldered this on, forgot the outer connector. Oh no. And even experienced guys will do that from time to time. He said he puts a piece of shrink wrap here, and that's also a good idea. You can use it for a number of things. You can use different color codes for lengths. If you make up a bunch of cables and say you got some that are 10 and some are 5 and some are 12 or whatever, you can use a different color code for lengths. Or you can use it for, if you had different ohm ratings, you could use a color code for something like that. But anyway, he puts that on there on the outer side. I am sure no one here has forgotten this step and found they could not get the outer shell on the coax. Okay, so he thought of it too. Then those little holes in the connector, they have a reason. That's where the solder goes. And so you got to use a fairly good size soldering iron or soldering gun to do a connector. Don't use your circuit board solder tip. You'll never get it done. You got a lot of metal you got to heat up here. So you heat the connector and apply solder in the holes, and the solder will flow down into the braid. And you repeat that, go all the way around, make sure you get all the holes, and everything should be smooth, and it should look something like this. You also solder the tip, heat the tip about in here, and then get the solder to flow inside to make sure it gets that copper piece in there fully engulfed in solder, and you've got yourself a real good connection.
Comment real quick.
Yeah.
The one before, at the tip, make sure there's no pockets, no air bubbles or pockets in the solder tip. In the very tip of that solder there. You want you want to be completely solid. You don't want no pockets coming out with the holes in it.
Yeah, you fill it up with solder completely.
Yeah.
And I see he's doing that here. It looked, I think he had already done it here. It doesn't, he's showing here how he's doing it. He's adding, he's filling it up with solder. And then you want to check it to make sure that if you have both ends, that you don't have continuity between the two. And then he's using 70% IPA. I don't know. Whatever you can get, 99% or even 90% is almost impossible to find unless you go to somewhere that sells chemicals or electronics store. Ken has it at his store, or order it online. But this is the stuff, this comes from Amazon, this particular brand. And if you go to CVS or somewhere, you probably get 70 or something. Anyway, he cleans off the excess flux with the alcohol, and then heat the shrink wrap or the shrink tubing. It will help keep water from entering the connector. It's not an alternative to proper sealing for the connector outside. A lot of them that you buy that are commercial that are already done, they use this to put their logo on, the company name or whatever. And there you go. You got a finished connector. Even Bill Talanian would be proud.
Which
Okay.
he has, Bill has one of the best tools to assemble cables or the antenna arrays I've ever seen.
I am looking, here's some tools. This is it's got wire strippers, needle nose pliers, cutters. He doesn't specify that these are flush cutters, but these are. There's no bevel on them. The good pair of tweezers is really, really helpful. These are a good quality. The ones that you get for like $5, you get 6 different ones. They're not too good. The tips don't always meet. And spending you for less than $10, you can get a real good pair of like almost surgical grade tweezers. And the important thing is that sometimes you end up you need your tips to meet exactly when they close. And those Chinese ones that have the black handles and then they're real common. Those are more for like if you're gardening or something, I don't know, but they're not, I don't think they're really suitable for electronics, and they're very soft and you can bend them really easy. These are stainless. And of course, these are the benders for leads for components. This is a circuit board vise holder. There's all kinds of these. There's some, depending upon the size that you like to do. This is this type here, and then there's another type, but this lets you turn the board over without having to unclamp it. And then there's another type that's sort of like this, and it's got 2 ends to it, and it's like it sets up almost like say like a volleyball net. And there's clamps at either ends that hold the board, and then you can actually spin it in there and then lock it to the position that you want. They're real handy, and they're a lot less cumbersome than this type, and they're fairly cheap. Here's a solder sucker. These work pretty good. These, you've probably, if you've done much soldering, you've used solder braid and wick the solder up that way. That works, but it's really a pain. These little solder suckers work, but they work a lot better than that. And they have little silicone tips that are heat proof, or at least solder heat proof. And the problem is you got to be really fast with them. When you remove the soldering iron and get this over there, it can only be a fraction of a second. So it takes a little bit of practice.
Brian,
Yeah.
real quick, I'm old school, so I have one of those and I've never used it. I've always relied on the strip, the solder wire. I just never relied on the sucker. I haven't used it. I still got it, but I've never used it.
We actually talked about them last night on the technical mentoring and Elmering that Ken's dad and Frank and myself all own that blue one at the top at one point in our history of soldering.
Yeah, none of you guys got my solder sucking gun.
I think I do. I've got the Hacko 808, right?
Wait, let me get it. It's right here.
But am I right, Dave? Have you ever used it? I mean, sure.
I used it until I bought like a self-contained gun with a built-in vacuum pump, and that's just a life changer.
Oh, really? Is it better than the actual wind up cable?
Oh yeah. Well, there's different applications, but I think what Brian has is exactly what I have. It's the black one, right, Brian?
No, I'll show you. Okay, let me finish this, and I got some stuff here, some show and tells.
That's funny.
Okay,
That's what I use. That's what I use.
yeah, this is for the guys that are technologically handicapped.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, here's a fan if you're so inclined. Oh, these are handy. These silicone soldering mats. If you don't have one, they're really good. You don't burn anything, and keeps your your work area clean. And it's got little things for all your, you can set your soldering iron on it and it won't hurt it. So I got a couple of those. They're real handy. You just if you work, if you don't have a dedicated workbench and you're working on the kitchen table, I mean, this can save a lot of grief at home. Okay, summary. Okay, that's about it. Now we're going to have a little show and tell here. If I can get it to go back. There we go. Now, let's see. Let me get Zoom back here.
It's at the top.
Yeah, I had to move it all around.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's see. It covered a lot of the presentation, so.
Well, thanks, Brian, because I really love the soldering. I love soldering, and if anybody has anything that's solder, please let me know, because I'll do it in a heartbeat, because it's a second nature for me. I love soldering.
Now, let me show you a couple things here. This is a lead bender for doing components and bending your leads. But a lot of times I use this. Let me see if I can show you the tip. See how it has that little curve thing in there?
Turn it sideways. Sideways. There you go.
See, there's a curved thing, and then the top thing is different. It starts skinny and gets fat.
Well, that's the rounded tip pliers.
Well, what you can do with this is you can do your leads with this, and it's really neat if you need to do a compound bend in something. Like, say you made a mistake on your circuit board and you realize that you got a lead that has to go over jump another component. And I've done it, and everybody, that if you're making your own things, and you can do it real easy with this and make your board look like it was planned that way. And they're real handy to have. And if you're just doing, if you're just sort of doing something quickly, and it's just one of the things I have right next to me. And let's see, this is that is why is that getting fuzzy? Okay, there's a regular soldering wick. This is my little solder sucker. Has a little button on it, and you go, and it sucks things out.
I gotta try that.
But this is what I use. That is I know what it is. It's that,
Yeah, turn off your background blur.
yeah. It's that fuzzy background. Okay.
The mega sucker.
This is one of the best things I've ever bought. It is, all I do is turn it on and it heats up this little tip right here. And in the tip, there's a little hole. And I got different tips with different size holes. But this is perfect for normal PCB soldering that, we do with most of our projects. And it just stays hot and it sits there on a little rack. And then when I want to desolder something,
So
put
so
that over
Brian-
the lead, pull the trigger, and a little vacuum comes on and it sucks all the solder out and it looks like it was brand new.
So Brian, are you saying you make a lot of mistakes?
Oh, I'm saying I upgrade a lot.
Here's mine.
Actually, I buy things sometimes that are, that are components that have leads soldered on them already, and I don't want them. And if I want to remove them, like try and desolder a 40-pin header on a Raspberry Pi. You'll be there until, start in the morning, get your coffee. You'll still be there at lunchtime trying to desolder that thing. I can desolder 40 pins with this in probably 3 minutes.
Well, a lot of soldering from China is easy, but stuff from the USA is they use the highest soldering stuff, solder that is really high temp, and it's hard to suck them out.
Yeah, no, this does it. And then there's this little thing comes out, and I empty out the little solder bits every now and then.
You just
The key-
technical.
The key
Sure
thing,
beats the one I used to use. I used to have one that had a little rubber bulb on on it that would you could get the thing hot, and then it had a rubber bulb to provide suction. So what you're using looks a lot more efficient than that.
Yeah, until the rubber ball tip melted.
the best thing about the item that Brian has, and I have the previous generation, Brian, if you take a look here.
Sweet.
This is the one right before yours.
Yeah.
But the good thing about what Brian and I have is the vacuum is continuous, but you can wiggle the solder joint.
Yeah.
So you heat the whole thing up, and while it's vacuuming, you don't grind the tip into the board because you'll lift and tear a pad off, but you float it on the board close to the pad, and then you jiggle it. And so that gets the solder all around the terminal, and it's fantastic. I had to I got an HP signal generator, and the attenuator board was bad. I had 4 relays to unsolder, and each relay had 18 pins. Took me a few minutes with this thing on a double-sided plated through hole boards with a ground plane, which is going to suck all your heat out. And that would be hell with a solder wick.
Well, Dave, you have a good comment there, because if you overheat the circuit board, you can dethrone your copper wire to the board. And this prevents that from happening. And that's really important. You don't want to ever have to have the copper wire come off the circuit board.
No, you don't want to suck your pads off either. You don't want to get it so hot that it is impossible to you can't use it anymore. But I think I did that once with this sucker, and then I realized what I was doing wrong, and I never did it again. It just works, and it's one of those things. If I'm doing something and I make a mistake as I go along, I put the wrong resistor in or something, it's not a big deal. It's just, it doesn't wreck my day. I just, and it's pulls right out, and I slip the right one in, and I'm good to go. So, and if you leave the leads long, you can even reuse the part, because it doesn't, it can take a lead of about 1.5 inches or 2 inches, and it just sucks the solder right out of there.
Okay,
So,
I'll use mine more often.
Yeah. Anyway, so there you go. Now, everything you ever wanted to know about soldering and then some. Anybody have any questions?
I just have a comment about flux that has burned a few people that have worked for me in the past. He mentions, make sure if you're using a water-based flux to clean it off. And that's super important. I had a guy stuff a bunch of boards for me, and he used organic solder, organic flux-based solder, water-based, and he didn't clean it. And this was a high voltage board. And over time, within days, we had these shorts, and I opened the board up and powered it up, and I had burned arcs going through on the surface because it's very hygroscopic. So it pulls moisture in and keeps it wet. And you got all these ions flowing through once you add electricity, and it's just bad. So water-based stuff, you absolutely must clean. Rosin core, you don't have to. No clean, you don't have to unless you use it in high temperature applications. So that's all.
Well, Dave, why would you use a water-based cleaning solution? That's why I always use IPX.
A very good reason is environmental reasons. The other thing is board manufacturers, pick and place machines, stuff like that. They tend to use it. They tend to use a slightly more aggressive flux, and that's stuff. In fact, I have a gallon here that I use occasionally. If I'm doing super small SMT stuff like 0201 stuff or 0402, that stuff is like the size of pepper. Oh my gosh. The board, the pad, you can't even keep the pad clean enough. It tarnishes so fast with the soldering iron, but the organic based, water-based flux keeps it clean. So the small stuff, SMT with challenging components, that's why they use it, but you definitely have to clean it off.
What are you using to clean that water-based off?
Oh, just hot tap water with a DI rinse afterwards.
So how do you put it in a dehumidifier or something?
No, I'll just blow it off with compressed air. Sometimes I'll throw it in the oven on low heat and let it dry out, but usually compressed air will dry it just fine.
I would probably put it in the oven. Yeah, okay, that sounds good.
Okay, well, I guess that's about it for tonight.
I missed the whole thing. I missed it.
Carol, you're asleep.
I couldn't get the Zoom to work
Oh,
in an hour and a half. I found it 2 minutes before the end of the net. I got the Zoom to work.
I called for you too, Daryl.
I didn't get any calls.
No, I didn't call you. I called you on Zoom here. I
Didn't work. It didn't work.
well,
Sorry, I missed. Play it all back.
it's you'll be able to watch it on YouTube.
Would you talk about somebody having soldering iron with a crust on it? Wouldn't be metal, or some coating is no good anymore for solder? What'd you talk about?
A whole lot of stuff.
Did you talk about that? About using tarnished soldering iron tips?
No.
You didn't.
I would hope nobody would do that.
You never want to use a tarnished soldering tip. Sorry, you have to always clean it.
Well, sure, it should be metal, but these things do tarnish. I've run into the tarnishing problem when they get too hot. The way you can easily control the temperature of your iron is to use a isolation transformer or something with a rheostat, something to turn it down, and that works beautifully.
We talked about the soldering station, yeah.
I just
About adjusting the temperature of your tip.
talking about cleaning irons. I recall using steel wool when the thing got hot and the tinning, that there was a little corrosion amongst the tinning, that you could tin it and then clean off the excess with steel wool.
Or you can get tip tinner.
That stuff's
Done that too.
Well, I'm sorry, but all you guys, NASA standards always uses the wet sponge. The wet sponge is what we used.
Yeah, sometimes you need a little more aggressive stuff though. I know that like what Brian has there, that stuff is like it's so little work to get your tip clean again. I remember having to do like Daryl said with steel wool, or I'd usually use like an X-Acto blade and scrape it, 90 degrees to the blade. But or sal ammoniac is another tip cleaner that you can use. But the stuff Brian has, that stuff is like easy peasy.
Yeah, you just turn your tip on it a little bit and it's all nice and shiny again and you're good to go.
I had that in my truck and it melted in my truck and then leaked all over my stuff and I had to clean it out. It was a mess.
Okay, well, I guess that's about it for this month. We won't be having a regular club meeting in December. It's always too close to Christmas time and a lot of people have other things going on.
Oh.
We're talking about like a club Christmas party like we've done in past years, like at Rusty's. However, if you've been to the Rusty's pizza thing, you know that we're almost sitting in each other's laps.
No problem.
And
Been a problem.
and I don't know how good that is. So that's everybody. We've got to be at least somewhat concerned about. We kind of are, especially down at the club station. We just trust everybody isn't going to come in if they're not feeling good, and they're not even going to come down, or if they haven't been vaccinated or something, because everybody else has been vaccinated, and we've been no problems. But Rusty's is very, very close. I mean, you're literally sitting 2 inches away from people, and I don't know. We're talking about see if we can find some place where we might be able to sit outside, some restaurant or something where we could have a little party, or somewhere with some more room. But the last couple of times we've had it at Rusty's, it seems like the rooms keep shrinking, and it just gets packed with people. And you're literally are climbing over people to get a spot on the bench. So that's probably not a good idea. I don't even know if Rusty's is doing that. I mean, you'd have to be, I doubt that they must have some kind of rule as far as how many people can be in the room, because we've gotten, 30, 40 people in a room the size of a garage and smaller than a garage. And so anyway, we're trying to figure out an alternative way to do that. So we'll be posting some stuff. We still got a little time left. So it'd probably be in somewhere in the second or third week of December, which is coming up pretty soon. But we'll be letting you know. And January, we're hoping we are counting on, we're planning at this point on going back to full-time in-person meetings. And as long as some other new variant doesn't come along that wipes everybody out, then that's what we're going to do.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Santa, hello, is getting his booster on the 24th, and I'm going to possibly light the Christmas tree downtown. And I will be Saturday and Sundays here at Monterey Pines from 5 to 7 all month of December for all your family. Any of you have children from 0 to 10 and from 10 to 14, bring them, because I'm handing out gifts. First come, first serve. And I have some fantastic gifts for your 14-year-olds that who first come, first serve.
All my children are in their one's 51 and the other one's 49.
Okay, well, you know what? I'm talking about kids, grandkids, whoever, 14 and above, that like helicopters, speedboats, remote controlled items, because I'm handing some of them out pro bono. I mean, I'm not charging anybody any fee, anything to see Santa. I'm gonna be posted out here on my residence under a 12 by 12, Monday through, Saturday and Sunday from 5 to 7 in December. So I'll be handing out candy canes, coins, all that good stuff. Pass it on in the group. First come, first serve, because that's what you get. I've got a big, huge donation from Tinker Toys in Carmel, and I paid for about $400 worth of toys, and they gave me 44% off, and I have a lot of stuff to give out. And I'm doing this because I'm just giving back to the community, but I've been approached through Santa Barbara downtown to light the Christmas tree downtown. So I may be working Thursdays, December, for a couple hours every Thursday in December. So all you folks,
Everybody knows December is Santa's busiest month.
Yeah.
like I said, I'm giving it out to those who are online now. Pass it on to your family and your friends and your folk. And I'm just telling you that I love you all and just hope that things work out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody have a good Thanksgiving. And if you are in the area, come by the club station tomorrow. There might be a special occasion happening.
Oh, I think I remember that.
Yeah, so be there, be square.
Special.
Anyway.
What's that?
Huh?
What's going on tomorrow?
Well, I'm not gonna say because I don't know who's what's going on, but if you're in the area, just come by.
All right.
Okay. And you don't have to dress like Santa. There won't be anybody there that Doc might sit on your lap if you don't mind.
Not if he's gonna cough in my face.
No. He's
I always use my coat to cover my mouth, but
yeah, he's coughed in my face before and I'm still sitting here. All right, you guys, thanks for coming tonight. We'll say Merry Christmas if we don't see you before then.
thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Later.
Night all. See you guys. Good weekend.